So today we're gonna talk about Emil Cioran's The Trouble with Being Born. Now this is the first book of Cioran that I've read. I've watched a couple of videos on his work, and pretty much I was convinced, based on those videos by a single person, to buy pretty much every book of his that I could find. And this is the first one that I've read. Um, even the title alone should make you want to read this book. The Trouble with Being Born. That alone is big swag. You gotta, and after reading this, you know, I have to suggest and advise all of you who haven't read Emil Cioran to try him out, try his work, even if you are not into philosophy. This man has a intellect and a sense of humor so profound, so hilarious that you keep on reading. And unlike other books, philosophical or otherwise, that might put you to sleep, in case with Emil Cioran, that hasn't happened yet. I I was paying attention, I was aware, I wasn't reading paragraphs and just forgetting everything. That's not the case with Emil Cioran. Even if you are not a fan of any sort of philosophy, you might still find some sort of joy, some sort of relief with this man's incredible spirit and, like I said before, his sense of humor is on another level. Okay, people today on the internet, all of these clowns, they think they have a sense of humor. They do not know what a real sense of humor is. And if you want to find out what a sense of humor really is, intelligent as well as charming, you might want to check out Emil Cioran. The title alone, The Trouble with Being Born. You cannot have a serious, adult, mature conversation with other people on such matters. That is why we retreat to books. But you can't talk to. If for example, I cannot talk to people on this subject matter, especially if I start a conversation with the title of this book, The Trouble with Being Born. Because most people, when they hear something like this, automatically believe that this book is a downer, that it is pessimistic and cynical, skeptical, negative, nihilistic. Which they are, but they immediately equate, negativity, pessimism, cynicism to being a downer, being depressed, and there's nothing really wrong with any of that. But what I'm trying to say is you cannot talk to people about the trouble with being born because automatically most people assume that their births were, miracles, rarities, right, in the universe. Uh, they believe that their births were something tremendous, which of course isn't true. And if you say something like that to people, uh, they of course automatically take it as an attack or as a criticism, which should not be the case. This is stating something that is pure fact, which is I always say, having been born was a big mistake, probably the biggest mistake in my life. but I'm still here. That it's not necessarily a sad or depressing or negative thing. It's just simple fact. And I think that you have to have a level of self-awareness to make such a statement. You know, Having been born was a mistake. The trouble with being born, life isn't that amazing. Life is a bit overrated, overhyped, whatever you want to call it. And saying such a thing should not be taken as an attack or something necessarily negative. It's just stating a fact. And the thing that I notice with people is they don't want to let go of their sacred cows, their sacred cows being having been born, God, religion, institutions. They don't want to let those things go, even though they're dead. They're dead corpses, they're baggage, you gotta let them go. But most people, they cannot, they cannot let go of these weights that keep you down. So most people dare not say that having been born was a mistake and being alive is a hassle, it's a drag, whatever. And if you say that to somebody, they automatically assume that it is, I don't know, depressive or negative. No, it's a simple statement. It is a simple statement of a simple fact. There is no emotion, right? And I think a lot of people lack the maturity, or whatever you want to call it, to simply look at things objectively and make their assessments accordingly, right? And saying things like life is a drag and etc., etc., negative statements, they are not here to influence somebody to think negatively about these subjects. It's simply telling the truth. And I think that that is what philosophy should strive for, to tell the truth always, no matter what, right? That is the hallmark, the trademark of philosophy and of a philosopher. A philosophy has to be concise. Philosophy has to be to the point. Another example is, the philosophical statement that I heard, which influenced me, which woke me up from my slumber, was, of course, one of George Carlin's HBO specials. And the title of that special was Life is Worth Losing, right? And that title alone woke me up and put me on another level, on another spectrum. And yet again, most people, when they hear something like life is worth losing, they automatically assume that this is some sort of suicidal cry of despair. No, it's actually stating a simple fact. There should not be any emotion attached to it, of course. But yet again, you cannot talk to people about such subjects because automatically they assume the worst. They assume that it's negative or despairing or suicidal or whatever, which is not the case. Right? Now, with this book, what we have here are some of Emil Cioran's, you know, philosophical ideas, some of his statements, and they range on a lot of subjects, from basic life, from religion to philosophy to literature to history, all sorts of subjects. And I think he is the kind of writer that can have a large audience. His work, the way he thinks, the way he writes, his sense of humor, I think they are all capable of capturing members of the entire population. There is a bit of Cioran for everybody. And this is just me I've understood this simply from one of his books, right? So by reading this book alone, I've understood that Cioran is available for pretty much everybody that has an open mind. It doesn't help his case that Cioran focuses a lot on death and all the people that have died, and he focuses on cemeteries, and he loved to take a walk in cemeteries and look at the graves. And this comes back to the sense of humor of his, where wherever he looked at a grave in a cemetery, he thought, whoa, these people, they made it, they got out, they're finally free, etc. And he was jealous of these people, right? And a lot of people today might view this type of behavior as macabre or sinister or eerie or bizarre, right? Again, this sort of macabre fascination with death or obsession with death doesn't help his case, right? Because most people are pretty basic when it comes to death, for example. This is one subject that most people prefer to ignore, right? But I want to talk about that Cioran had obsessions, and he wrote about them with passion, even with a sort of despairing fanaticism, one being death and one being, that you're alive. It's such a tragedy to be alive, and I agree with that. But it did not help him as a philosopher, as a human being, to constantly just focus on these matters 24/7, from his youth until he died, because that's exactly what he did. And he wrote about him, and you can clearly detect his passion as well as his despair when he writes about certain subjects like death and what a tragedy it is to be alive, etc. Right? And it shows, and this is just my idea, but I think that I believe that if a person like Cioran focuses their entire life, their entire being on these matters, the fate of your country's history, the future of the nation, and so forth, right? Which he did, right? He really cared about, things that we should all care about. And this shows me his passion, his despairing passion tells me that even in the last moment of his life, he retained his humanity. You have to be humane in order to care about things that are outside of yourself. Now, this is a very important lesson that most people today have forgotten, because today, most people, they cannot even conceive of things outside of themselves, outside of their little bubble, right? For example, caring about your nation, the education of the youth, the lack of culture, the lack of standards, etc. History, right? Your history. People today don't care about these things, and it shows that we are continually going downhill in every way possible, in every way imaginable. But Cioran cared about such matters. He detected that without such concerns, people would become less than human, right? And that is why I say that he retained his humanity until the end, because he cared about, what happens after death. It's such a horrible thing to realize that life is a joke, that everything is disappointing, and the best thing that you can wish for is to disappear completely, right? So even if he proposed such ideas as, that it is better for you to be dead than alive, he still despaired on this matter, because of course life should be glorious and enjoyable, and all of the things in life should not be disappointments, that people should bask in the glory of life, etc. Right? So he retained his humanity because he cared about a wide range of subjects, right? Which, you know, for example, I'm gonna use myself, I don't care about what happens to my country or its future or where are we heading or, if there is there a God or if is there an afterlife. I don't care about these things. I've moved on with resignation. I'm completely indifferent to all of these things, and unfortunately, I have to admit that I have lost, or I should say, I just tossed away my humanity because I don't care about such things anymore, right? And at first, of course, there comes despair. You are horrified that pretty much everything in life is a disappointment, and you wonder, what's the point to all this? Was it all in vain? Is it all pointless? Is it all meaningless? And a lot of people that are awake and aware of these things, they despair, they obsess, they decry, they can't sleep at night. Even Cioran was a chronic insomniac because he focused his all on such matters, regarding God and religion and history and the fate of humanity, etc., which show his humanity, right? But I have renounced all of these concerns because they don't help you in any way, shape, or form. You know, I dropped all of this baggage, I let it go with resignation, and I stopped caring. And because I stopped caring about all these things that might keep you up at night, the despair went away. Now, this is just my case. It might be different for you, right? And I think this is the best thing you can do in life, is to resign yourself, um, relinquish all of these baggages, all of these weights that plague your mind, that keep you up at night, and I think you will have a better life. Because you can focus your entire life on matters. Is there an afterlife? Why doesn't anybody like me? Etc. etc. What's going to happen to me in the future? And you can peruse history and see all of the appalling atrocities, and it'll keep you up at night, and you won't sleep, and you won't eat, and you'll go crazy, and you wish you were dead. But that's not going to help you in any way, shape, or form, right? Now, it's a good thing that you have taken this path of not being a normie, right? But it won't help you if you despair throughout your life. You will have no happiness whatsoever. And that is why I resonate with Cioran so much, because I can see that he just went all in and he despaired with such passion about all of these subjects. Right? And of course it didn't help him, because he had horrible insomnia, right? And he despaired throughout his life. And I don't know if he found any answers to all of these problems that have plagued humanity since the beginning. So I think it is a good way of handling this despair that comes with finding out certain things, is that you should treat it indifferently, because otherwise, if you focus too much on it with passion, it will ruin your life. This despair, you will not be able to let it go. And so many people today, because they might have lost their belief in God, they might have lost their belief, their trust in people. From now until the end of their lives, they're going to despair, they're going to be alone, and they're going to cry about it, and they won't be able to sleep, and they'll just be miserable. And this has happened since the beginning of, conscious thought. And there are no answers to these questions. We're gonna find certain things out when we die, and we don't really know. But we like to hope that we're gonna find certain answers when we die, but we're gonna have to wait our turn, right? So we'll always live with a big unknown, right? And of course, the answer might be that there is nothing after death, life means nothing, we're all just specks of dust, and people are gonna go crazy because of this, right? But the best way to handle this is to be indifferent, to be resigned, move on, take it how it is, because otherwise, you're gonna ruin your life. And, just like Cioran, when I was younger, I despaired because of these things, because I didn't know if there is a God. I didn't know what happens after death, etc. I thought that people cared about me, and then when I discovered that these things were untrue, I despaired. I couldn't sleep. Half of my life was insomnia and despair and solitude, and loneliness. And one day I just had to say, fuck all of this shit. If it is true that we're all alone and that nothing matters, then that's fine. I accepted it and I just moved on, right? And maybe that might be the best medicine, because otherwise people, they cling and they depend on things like religion, on society, on government, and on certain philosophies to survive each day at a time. Because otherwise, if they surrendered to cynicism and pessimism, they might lose their minds. And once you go that route, it is very difficult to pull yourself back up. And I have experience with this, right? A lot of people depend on things that are hollow. They cannot accept the simple fact that, you know, nothing really matters. There might be nothing beyond death, and that our intrinsic value might not be that high to begin with, right? And even if there is a God, who's to say that he cares about us in any way, shape, or form, you know? And a lot of people, they cannot conceive this, they cannot accept it, they cannot stomach it, they cannot tolerate it, and they pretend like such things cannot possibly, that they cannot accept that such things might be valid, right? And that it is all in vain and nothing matters and what have you, right? And even though they do not accept the truth that, having been born, our existence, what we do in this world, they all might be equal to zero, right? That they don't matter. Even if they don't accept this view, they latch on to religion, they latch on to pipe dreams, they latch on and they cling on and they rely on optimism, and they still suffer miserably, right? They still suffer miserably. Even though they have taken the normie route to believe all of this nonsense, they still suffer tremendously, right? That is why I say that the best cure, the best medicine is to resign yourself and to distance yourself from all of these dead weights, whatever these dead weights may be, right? And for example, even when it comes to certain beliefs and their philosophies like Hinduism and Buddhism, which, kind of say that you should step away and detach yourself, they do not go all the way, because I still believe that all of these religions, like these examples that I've just said, they still focus too much on the person. They still focus a lot on the suffering. It's me, it's about me, me, me. It's about my suffering, my hell. I gotta detach. I gotta be disconnected from the pain, from the suffering. All this pain is an illusion. And even This shows me that suffering is still prevalent because they always have to meditate, they always have to be in a trance because otherwise they have to face reality. And what is reality? What is life? It is continuous suffering. So, that's my stance on certain philosophical beliefs like Buddhism and Hinduism, right? Just let it go. Accept the fact that there is only darkness for us, and it is all pointless, it is all meaningless, nobody cares about us, and that should be a liberating thing. But people cannot accept this. They cannot accept that they might be absolutely nothing, that their existence might mean nothing to everybody. They cannot accept this, right? And and that is why suffering still exists. And I'm not here to say that I have all the answers, but it helped me. This choice of resignation, of just being indifferent, it helped me. And when I read people like Cioran, and you read about how his life went and how it ended, and all of these macabre and so somber obsessions about death, and oh boy, death is gonna come, and all of these people died, and you know this sort of thing is a tragedy, right? After I resigned myself, I couldn't care less what happens to me in the afterlife. I don't care if there is an afterlife. I don't care that death is always on, just right around the corner, and neither should you, because it is a fact of life. It will happen to all of us, while you're still here. Enjoy what you have, especially the little things. Stop obsessing constantly about, oh boy, what's gonna happen? Life sucks. People are horrible. It is what it is. It is what it is, okay? Detach yourself from everything that hurts you, people included. Move on, find a passion, and you're probably gonna improve your life if you make this choice, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to ignore, the fact that you're gonna die one day. But what I'm saying is that it doesn't matter. It's gonna happen. You can't do anything about it, and there might not be anything after it. So just relax, right? Relax, because I feel so sorry for Cioran, because you can tell from his writing that he was chronically and pathologically obsessed and afraid and in constant terror of death, of his fate after death, and at the same time, he couldn't wait to just disappear, right? So it's this duality that at the same time you hate being alive, you hate that what life is. Life is a disappointment to you, and you want to disappear. You want death to come for you, but at the same time, you're still so very much afraid of what death entails, because death might entail, the very last chapter, and then it's lights out, right? Cioran is famous for a few quotes. One of his most famous quotes is that, a lot of things that are done too late. And he says this about suicide. He says, even suicide after a certain age is done too late. It has no impact. It has no significance. And because even with the important things, we all do them too late in life for them to matter, which is the idea, the beautiful idea, or the beauty is that if you're going to commit suicide, it should be, in the prime of your youth, 18, 19, 20. If you're going to do it later, after that prime of your youth, then it doesn't matter because it's too late. And I don't agree with that. Especially when it comes to suicide, I think it doesn't matter when you do it. If you feel that it is right, then you should then it has importance to you, right? And of course, if you want to tackle this subject, I think it was Albert Camus who said, the only philosophical question that has any relevance is whether or not a person should commit suicide. I agree with that wholeheartedly, and that everything else, every other question, is pretty much pointless. They don't matter. This is the question. And if you choose to do it of your own accord, then it is never too late, right? And suicide should not be viewed as this negative, horrible thing. If a person suffers, if a person is done with life, if life is horrendous to that person, then I believe that person has a right to check out, right? And that's how it should be viewed. But yet again, this is why people view suicide as such a terrible thing, is because suicide is the proof that the life that they cling to is a joke, a disappointment, and they will not accept this fact as a fact. So that is why they criticize and belittle suicide, because suicide is the answer to the question that life, in totality, with few exceptions, is a miserable situation, and the best thing that you can do is check out as soon as possible and leave no mark whatsoever. But of course, yet again, most people, they cannot think this way because they cling too much. They care too much for whatever reason. That's their problem. Like, they care too much about all of this. All of this doesn't matter, right? What you do here doesn't have any relevance, and you shouldn't cry about it. Just be an adult, have some fun without being, an animal, and everything else will solve itself. And there's always, there is this idea that life should be fulfilling, that you shouldn't waste your time, that you should always um, work, that you should be productive, that you should have always an occupation, that you should strive to improve and excel. And you can tell that Cioran struggled with this, because every time he didn't write, he felt bad about it, right? Even though he continued to procrastinate. And yet again, I feel sorry for him because he didn't. I feel sorry for him because he refused. What? No, actually, his conscience didn't allow him to take it easy, because he thought that if you laze about, then there's something wrong with you, that you have to be productive, that you have to contribute to society. And his conscience just picked at his brain constantly, and you can tell in his writing that it bothered him that he was not working, not writing, etc. But yet again, this is something that you need to drop immediately if you do not want to suffer. You know, I'm a writer myself. I don't write every day. I'm not productive in any way, shape, or form, and that is the beauty of this philosophy. It doesn't matter if you're productive or not, right? Stop being so hard on yourself. It's not going to help you out. Which is to say that, in my view, the best philosophy, the best choice, the best path for you to take is to do absolutely nothing with your life. That is the height, the apex of a philosophy. If a person decides to just be a lazy, no good nothing, and do nothing but sleep, then that to me shows that this person is enlightened. This person is edified. This person has reached nirvana, right? Because every single day I look out the window and I see these people always buzzing about like little hardworking bees, workaholics, doing this, doing that, going there, doing this, every day in motion, and this doesn't do anything in the long run. In the long run, this doesn't help anything or anybody. They're just pretending to matter. They're pretending that all of this matters. They're pretending that this has a meaning, that what they're doing is important, significant, relevant, which it isn't, and it's a sad thing to see, right? The best way to live life is to do absolutely nothing. Stop worrying so much. Stop being afraid all the time. Stop letting your conscience constantly beat you over the head. You gotta do this, you gotta work, you gotta find an occupation. This is not gonna save you. It's gonna keep you occupied for a while, right? So that the bad thoughts don't come. But in the long run, the bad thoughts will come nonetheless. It doesn't matter what you do. See, people work themselves to death because of that dopamine trip, that serotonin. It gives them a temporary high when they achieve something, but it goes away. The effect goes away fast, so therefore they have to chase another achievement, another accomplishment again and again. It's like a drug addiction, right? The best way to live your life is to do nothing. If you sleep all day long and don't bother anybody and don't and mind your own business, then you are an enlightened being. Okay, but most people, they cannot accept this. Most people cannot accept that perhaps, perchance, maybe all of this, even ourselves, life itself, our lives, they are absolutely meaningless. They cannot accept this fact. So that is why they buzz around trying to do things that don't matter, because otherwise, what do you have? You have darkness. And most people cannot handle that darkness, the abyss, right? If you stare at the abyss will stare back. And that is terrifying, apparently. But I say, so what? Let the abyss stare back. So what? Right? This is what I'm saying, is that people have to grow the fuck up eventually and face that abyss, right? Because it's because of that fear that, oh boy, this might be pointless, right? If you don't face that fear, right, you're gonna suffer forever. And that is no way to live, right? And then you have people who face the abyss, and all they get in return is despair, misery. They feel miserable. They want to check out, but they can't do it. And that is how they suffer even more. And all they do is to cry about their life. They cry about and they bitch and they moan and they whine about all the things that they don't get. They don't have respect. They don't have love. They don't have acceptance. They don't get paid enough, and so on. This is what most lives consist of, and it's a tragedy, right? It is a tragedy because you can fix most of these things by simply resigning yourself, detaching yourself with indifference, and just move on. Move on and live your life how you want to live it, right? Indifference goes a long way. Resignation goes a long way. When you realize, one day I'm gonna die, nothing is gonna happen afterwards. My life was a joke. Nobody cared about me. Having been born was a mistake. All of this. So what? That is why I say you have to be mature about this. Accept this and move on. A lot of people are too emotional. And I was the same. When I was younger, I was just so emotional, so distraught. Oh, I'm special. Why does this have to happen to me? Why don't people like me? Why don't people respect me? Oh boy, right? You gotta toss that shit away, aside, and move on. And your life will improve immediately, right? And I think this is what philosophy should strive for. Philosophy should be concise, and philosophy, even religion, they should help people realize that maybe we're all living with delusions, and we are all chasing illusions, and perhaps the best way is to let it all go, right? You can believe all of the nonsense, all of the optimism, and of the positive thinking, whatever, right? But maybe the best course of action is to let go, you know? Because at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what happens after death. And the future is completely irrelevant, insignificant, right? But that's about it, right? If you want to improve your life, then you should read Emil Cioran, because the way he lived his life, with passion, with fanaticism, he obsessed over so many things, and at the end of the day, he just died like everybody else. Of course, he left behind a great work, a great body of work, but at the end of the day, the result was the same, and his entire life was spent in insomnia and misery and despair and fear of death, but at the same time wanting to die and so forth, right? If you want to improve your life, I highly suggest that you read some Emil Cioran, because he is an example of how you should not live your life. You should not choose the path that he chose of just reading every book imaginable, reading every history book, reading every book this man read non-stop, right? He knew everything about everything. And it didn't help much. It didn't help much, right? And he obsessed over death so arduously. And he obsessed about all the horrible negative things, all the negative aspects of life, that he didn't live it, right? He spent his life in a little apartment, writing occasionally, taking walks, and he despaired, right? He despaired. That was his life. And it's a sad tragedy, right? For you to better your life, read Emil Cioran and don't make the mistakes that he made, which is that he obsessed over all of these things the entirety of his life. It didn't help him in any way, shape, or form. Now, it is healthy to think about death and what life is, and etc., on occasion, but constantly, that's not going to help you at all. That's pretty much it. I would suggest that everybody should read Emil Cioran, because he has nothing but wisdom, nothing but knowledge to give to everybody, right? And the best wisdom that you can take is the way he lived his life, and not follow in his footsteps, not follow in his footsteps. Don't make all of the mistakes that he made, because all of us, when we were young, I keep remembering when I was younger, I was just so sad, so depressed. Life sucks. Nothing is the way that it is. I was promised greatness and nothing happens. Everything is disappointing. I'm sad all the time. I'm alone all the time. And that could have been the entirety of my life. I could have done nothing else but focus on all of these negative aspects of my life, right? Like Cioran did. But I moved on because I realized that if you don't distance yourself, if you do not choose indifference and resignation, these things will corrode and rot and decay your inner spark, and you'll become a hollow shell, right? And I have to mention this. The best way to live your life is to do absolutely nothing, to have no goal, no mission, and so on. That you don't strive for accomplishments, and so forth. That is the best way to live your life, right? Because you understand that it is all pointless. So why should I waste my time with nonsense when I just can sit in bed all day and sleep and just feel amazing, right? That's about it. Emil Cioran, The Trouble with Being Born, uh, an amazing thinker, fantastic sense of humor. Everybody should read him. The trouble with being born is that we're all taught to take life too seriously. And most of all, we are taught to take ourselves too seriously. That is a problem, that is an issue, and you should fix that immediately, right? We are taught that we have all of this worth, that we're all so special and unique and important and relevant and significant. We are taught that all of these things should be taken seriously, and there is no reason, there is no motive for this philosophy. So that is the trouble with being born. We are taught and indoctrinated to believe that life is important and that it should be taken seriously, which it shouldn't. I think the best piece of advice is that you should calm down, relax, step back, and enjoy whatever it is that you enjoy, because sooner or later it's all gonna end, and it really, really doesn't really matter, right? The best thing that you can do is enjoy the time you have here now, because I don't believe that there's gonna be anything after this life, right? So you have a little piece of time here, and no matter what horrible thing has happened to you, if you're healthy enough, you can have a great life. Even you can have a great life even by doing absolutely nothing. You see, but most people, they're not there yet. They have to elevate their thinking, because and they can't do it because they take life too seriously, right? But that's about it. This has been Emil Cioran, The Trouble with Being Born. Everybody should read him, read this book. It is worth it, right? Philosophy can do amazing things for you. Reading can do amazing things for you. The best thing that any book can do is to teach you that all of the things that you cared about were a bad joke and that you should take it easy. That is what the best books in the world can do for you. The best books in the world demonstrate that your suffering was absolutely nothing at all, and that you took it too seriously, you took it to the extreme, you escalated the situation for nothing, for no reason whatsoever. Calm down, and everything will be fine. That is what the best books should do, right? And if you didn't know, I'm a writer myself. I have a few books on Amazon. If you want to help this channel, if you want to help me out, you can buy these books on Amazon. Thanks for watching.